little to no luck when it comes to filming the Nissan 370z. On my first attempt, I arrived at the filming location to find out that there had been a snowstorm overnight. On my second, I was shooting in Nevada, a state which apparently is entirely without decent driving roads. And then, third time lucky, we had a global pandemic on our hands. But the instruction has now come from HM government that those of us who are able to work whilst maintaining social distancing should do so. And that being the case, I am now here to carry on working and providing you with more lovely content. Now, I'm very thankful today to fellow YouTuber Antony, who's brought along his beautiful car for me to review. And while I'm doing this, he's going to be out playing in my S2000. Now, it's very difficult to believe, but this is actually only a 2-year-old car. To the untrained eye, it's a very similar looking vehicle to the nearly 2-decade-old 350Z. But spend a little longer looking at it and the spec sheet and you'll realise that they are in fact quite different. This is shorter, wider, lower. It's clearly a more sporting car rather than the slightly muddled muscle GT sports car mix that the 350Z was. However, in many other respects, it is very old school. Up front, you've got a 3.7 litre naturally aspirated V6. In the middle, just 2 seats, a 6-speed manual gearbox, and at the rear, just 2 driven wheels. It is really a very classic sports car formula, and exactly the kind of thing that a lot of people say would make their perfect sporty car. However, the truth is, very few people were actually prepared to put money where mouth is and buy one for themselves. It's a bit of a shame, really. And elsewhere around the world, the 350 and 370Z certainly seem to be more of a success. Perhaps that's down to our fuel prices or simply our taste, who can tell. In America, there is still a very dedicated and hardcore following for these and a huge modding scene. And in the great tradition of all Japanese cars, this one isn't entirely standard. Now, ordinarily, this will be the moment where I ask the owner to talk us through the car. Unfortunately, for obvious reasons, he's all the way over there. So if you want to know more about the mods of this car in greater detail, please do go and check out his channel, and the link for that will be in the description down below. But in short, you have KW V3 fully adjustable coilovers, very high quality items those, and most unusually to see on a car like this, you've also got a KW hydraulic lift system to stop it from destroying itself on all those evil speed bumps that you have in the city. Then, making it go a little bit faster and sound a little bit better, you have HKS high flow intake, you've got high flow cats, you've got a Tarmac Sports resonated exhaust at the back with huge tips, and it does sound very tasty. And then to complete the package, you have a remap courtesy of Abbey Motorsport, which is on a switchable Ecutech system, much like you'd see on a GTR, and that brings power up to 370 brake, up from the 339, which these run standard. I've seen online places claiming this car makes 350 standard, but that may just be things on the internet getting it wrong or whatever. But this car now makes 370 with just over 300 pound-foot of torque. That's a 30 pound-foot increase, bringing it up to about 410 Newton meters for those that like that system. So those are the numbers, but how does it drive? Is it pleasingly old school or just old hat? Let's find out. As part of that Ecutech remap from Abbey Motorsport, this car has selectable maps. I'm currently running in map number 3, also known as the Pops and Bangs map, or the antisocial lout map, as I think most people would call it. This is definitely one of the loudest cars that I can recall reviewing. In fact, it might be even louder than the very shouty Aston Martin Vantage that I drove last year. The cabin really shakes and booms thanks to that exhaust setup, and I have to say that is a part of this car that is not to my liking. However, there's plenty which is. We're currently stuck behind an incredibly slow-moving Polo. We'll hopefully dispatch them soon, but even still, the car's helm is actually full of the kind of feel that we all talk about very fondly from many years ago. No, it's no real 911 beater, but it's got just enough to really make my inner petrol head quite pleased. The car's also got reasonable grunt from low down too, even in a fairly high gear and at about 2000 RPM, which is never going to be the natural happy place for a naturally aspirated engine. It still doesn't mind it. quite crazy as well to see what is an almost entirely analog set of dials. Yeah, there's some minor concessions to the 21st century in the form of a, well, fairly out-of-date pair of LCD screens, one for the gear and one for your MPG and everything else. MPG, as it happens on this car, is not really its strong point, but then if you're looking for fuel economy in a car like this, you are looking in the wrong place. The view out of the bonnet is really nice too, because you've actually got one. You can see it, and those pronounced little creases in it are absolutely marvellous. The gear shift is really nice too, a fairly short throw, and you can heel and toe with relative ease. Now in the 370s you've got an automatic blip. Now that is something that doesn't work when you're running the Pops and Bangs map. Apparently there's some part of the car software that are used to generate those extra farts out the back, and that means you don't get the feature. Despite the fact that this car sits quite low, the ride actually isn't that bad. It's a little on the bouncy side for my liking, but I feared that it would be much worse than it actually is. So I have to commend Antony for setting it up like this, and also to KW for producing a very nice suspension. I really do like their products. I haven't come across one that I don't like yet. It's in situations like this where I do really wish that exhaust was switchable in some way, shape or form, because I'm always somewhat socially conscious when I'm out reviewing, and doubly so in the present climate. It is something of an attention grabber, this car. One reason I suspect that this car might have always had a much easier time across the pond than here is no doubt the quality of the materials inside. They aren't very good. It very much harks back to the sort of 1980s, 1990s era of Japanese car, because it's kind of weird soft touch stuff here that I thought was gonna be like a scratchy plastic, but isn't. The steering wheel is part Alcantara, which is not wearing very well. That's one reason I don't like Alcantara. The car's certainly got enough miles on it. It's got just over 16,000, which is very good to see. All of the switches and things here are pretty standard Nissan, really, cheap black plastic, and that's fine if you can get these at a good deal, but when they were new, they weren't the cheapest thing around. The reality is, though, the 370Z is very much a car that is out of time. I struggle to think of any real direct competitors for it. Things like the MX-5, which of course are exclusively convertible, don't have anywhere near as much power and are quite a bit cheaper. And then you go the other way and you look at the equivalent Porsche, and it's going to be a lot more money. Especially if you want to, say, get into 911 territory, you're looking at nearly double the sort of entry point. These Recaro seats are very nice indeed, and I've known them in quite a few different cars, including the first generation Lotus Evora. They are a perfect combination of supportive and comfortable. Now, I know a lot of people don't like the fact that you can't lower them. Nissan apparently used a base which was specific to them, meaning that regular Recaro lowering rails don't work in here. But actually for me, and I am the sort of person that really hates an elevated driving position, this works just fine. Visibility is actually pretty good as long as you're looking forward. Rear three-quarter, not so much. That glass at the back is pretty much useless. But otherwise, it does feel like a pretty decent car to be in, and it's got a feeling of being proper and sporty. It's certainly a far cry from, say, a hotted up saloon. Around town, the throttle is actually not particularly easy to modulate, and that might actually be partly due to the Pops and Bangs map. Antony did warn me about that. It's a little bit lurchy. It's very, very sensitive at low RPM and low speeds. But ultimately, the test of any sports car, especially one which is supposed to have such old world charm about it, is going to be how it handles a B-road. I do apologise for the first half of this review being a little bit sedate, but I am not taking any risks at this point in time. I wanted to wait for the traffic to naturally clear itself. And now it's done that, it's time to go to work. Car does make a glorious sound, even if although that exhaust setup shakes the rear part of the cabin apart. Steering is really nice. Oh, the chassis is a bit odd because the front and rear don't feel quite as connected as I like them to. Oh, this thing's making so much racket. I wish it would be quiet. The funny thing is that it sounds like it should be some sort of hardcore, crazy, bouncy creation, and actually the suspension's doing a magnificent... Shut up! The suspension is doing actually a brilliant job of controlling the car. The steering tells you exactly what it's doing, and it's not the best chassis, it's not the best setup in the world, and its ultimate limits aren't massively high. You can have quite a bit of fun in it. Brake pedals, nice to modulate. There is a limited slip differential in these cars, but it isn't very good. Well, I'm having a lot of fun in this thing, and at legal speeds, which is not something you can do in quite a lot of cars. There's a reasonable amount of pull from quite low down, and there isn't the greatest of needs to actually rev this engine all the way out. There's still a benefit to doing that, of course there is, the naturally aspirated, sporty power plant, but it's not anything near like my S2000, which really lives or dies based on whether you're revving it. In fact, I know that to keep up with me, he's going to be working a hell of a lot harder back there. This is a genuinely exciting, great to drive, great to look at car. Believe it or not, the 370Z has a wheelbase 4 inches shorter than the 350. It's clearly a car that wants to be a lot sharper, a lot more exciting, a lot more dynamic. And really, I think that has worked. I was checking prices of these, and for a Nismo, you're going to be paying about £20,000 upwards. And they all look like pretty decent examples too. Now, it was a car with a very, very long lifespan, and in 2015 there were some updates, including the adoption of the ducktail at the back, replacing a sort of more overtly sort of, I guess, Japanese-looking rear wing. I wasn't initially a fan of the ducktail, and I'm still undecided, but all of the other additions to the bodywork I really do quite like, and it's got a real sort of sharp and impressively modern look about it. It doesn't feel like a vehicle or a model which is a decade old. Very, very impressive. This isn't going to make it into my affordable dream car series just because I don't think that it fits. But it is a vehicle which has been very good to its owner and is actually reasonably decent in terms of reliability and everything else. This one is still in its factory warranty period, so that's not much of a problem. And like I said before, if you want to know more about this car, please do go and check out Antony's channel. So in summary, Antony's 370Z Nismo looks, thumbs up, ride, yeah, big thumbs up. KWV3, very impressive, really like it. Exhaust, no, big thumbs down. For me, it actually ruins the experience, but it is very easy to change. And the good thing is that a naturally aspirated V6 is always going to make a nice noise, pretty much irrespective of what exhaust you put on there. So I want to say a big thank you to him for bringing the car out to me through. So I want to say a big thank you to him for bringing the car out to review. Thank you to you for watching, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.